attended council hearings in person. You've tuned in to our televised proceedings on Channel 13. Now, you have the chance to listen to us on the radio as we demystify the work of the people who do it. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council with your host, Josh Gibson.
Thank you, deep voiced person with the funky backbeat. Indeed, this is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. You can't have a government without a council, so you can't have a government radio station without a council show. This is it. I'm Josh Gibson, Director of Communications from the Council. You might also know me from social media as @CouncilofDC. And this is the Hearing Council podcast. We're very grateful and happy to have back as our guest At-Large Councilmember Robert White.
Glad to be back with you, Josh. I think it's my first time with you virtually, so and maybe it's the second. I can't even, COVID brain.
It's the second, but the reason why you might be a little blurry on it is it was at the very beginning. It was right after the Black Lives Matter protests, and it was the heat of things.
Okay, yeah, 10 years ago.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So how are you holding up in this sort of second phase of beginning to get our head above water in COVID?
I should say that I'm blessed. I'm holding up well. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. If I could complain though for a second, I have two young kids. My oldest Madison is about to turn 5. My youngest Monroe just turned 2. And my beard was a lot less gray when COVID started. So like every other parent, I'm so tired. Like I'm so tired. Other than that, I am great. And it's been wonderful to spend so much time with my kids, even if it's difficult to balance work.
Now, I must have been in a fog because you have a Madison and a Monroe.
Yes, I do.
Are you working through the presidency? Are you what? Tell me a bit about the naming protocol.
The next is Barack, boy or girl. No, so this is basically competition and lack of imagination. So I never thought I would have daughters. I knew for a fact I would never have daughters. So I didn't even have girl names picked out. But bought my first house on Madison Street, and I loved the name. And I thought, all right, well, if I ever had a daughter, I love that name. And that name won the competition between me and my wife for our first daughter's name. I had a great M name picked out for our second daughter, named after my godmother. But Christy decided, my wife, to do some research and find an M name that I would like better than the name I had picked out. And she came home with Monroe, who happened to be also the next president. And I thought it was an incredible name. It's powerful. It's strong. So I couldn't, it's a DC street name. And so I couldn't beat it.
One of my weirdest early memories of you was when we did a press event at the Wilson Building, you, me, and Charles Allen, where we had installed the changing tables finally in the men's rooms as well as the ladies' rooms. And so it was like, it sounds like a bad setup for a joke. Like you, me, Charles Allen, and the media walked into a restroom. I don't know what the punchline is, but yeah, I mean, it's a different council. With this younger council we have there are a lot of young children being raised by the men and the women of the council.
Yeah, there are, and it's a different council. It's also, I think, a generational shift. I'm a very hands-on father. Charles and Trayon White are as well. Honestly, we don't parent nearly as well as like Brienne makes us look bad. She can juggle things like without breaking a sweat. It always looked like a circus for me. But a funny story that I've never told about that changing table. I'm a brand new council member. One of my kind of first events, the media was there. I'm on the way driving with my daughter Madison, who was very small at the time, and all of a sudden we're driving, and as soon as we get there to the building, she has a blowout in her diaper, just an absolute nasty, disgusting blowout. Well, I packed the diaper bag, which had exactly one wipe. And here are like the cameras, right? Rolling, watching me, a competent dad, change the diaper and on the changing table. And I had one wipe. It was, we made it as graceful as we could, but I had to laugh about it. And I actually still laugh about it to this day.
Yeah, well, it's the thought that counts. You weren't, it wasn't like the Olympics where the, East German judge is holding up a number on your diapering.
I hit it. So, I had to fix the situation quickly after the cameras went off, but I hit it in the time.
Yeah, and I definitely know cameos from your kids in council hearings are not that everyone would ever do a drinking game during the council hearing, but that would definitely be a road to disaster if every time one of your kids made a cameo.
Yes, it would. It happens frequently.
And I heard that from social media that the beloved Ann Phelps helped you out at the mayor's budget briefing with a parenting assist.
Ann Phelps saved me. The mayor called a budget brief, and I actually asked that there be a virtual option because I have charge of my youngest in the mornings while my wife works, and the mayor said no. So I'm still a council member. I have to represent our residents. So I showed up with my daughter Monroe and hope for the best, and she actually held calm as usual until it was about time for me to speak. And then she just timed out. The internet wasn't working for some reason, so there was no way to distract her. And she just looked at me and said, "Daddy, get up." And I was like, "Please, no, don't get up. Stay down." She said, "No." and then it was my turn to talk. And I just kind of put my hand on her to make sure I knew kind of where she was. And she stayed still. And when I looked out the corner of my eye, I said, "Thank God for Ann Phelps, who sat there and occupied her." And anybody watching that on DC TV saw Ann Phelps, who's like one of the smartest people in this city, but also, killer with in the clutch with the baby.
Now I'm going to ask you one more sort of funny anecdotal question, then we're going to get to the meat of the matter. But again, from social media, you volunteered. I wasn't watching this particular hearing the other day, that one of your witnesses came to us live from the bathroom stall at an airport.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard the context beyond that. Can you give us quickly a thumbnail of how that came to be?
Very quickly, she leads a local nonprofit, and I'm not going to say who it is, but I will say I have an incredible respect. She was in, I called her name, the camera came on, and I see a baby changing station in what is clearly like public bathroom tiling behind her. And she says, I'm at an airport, I'm in a stall, I'm going to do my best. And I said, God bless you. And, this is one of the things that COVID allows. But what was impressive was two things. One, her camera angle was perfect. And whatever she was reading from was different than what was streaming the video. So she had this setup ready. The loudspeakers are blaring. And I told her, keep going because I can hear you. And just, flawless, really strong and helpful testimony, but very unique.
No, that is classic. That is amazing, and it just shows that the options available to us. If you don't have 6 hours to spend waiting patiently in the Wilson building for your turn to come your 3 minutes, you can make it work.
That's right.
We can all make it work.
That's right.
Okay, that ends the amusing anecdote / strange focus on public restrooms of the initial part of this interview. So there's a piece of legislation that you introduced recently on affordable housing, and I think you want to talk a bit about that. So why don't you give me the quick bio of that bill?
Yeah, this is the GAIN Act. I just introduced it, very excited about it. And the long and short is that it costs a lot less and is a lot quicker to acquire existing housing for affordable housing than it is to kind of build it. So I wrote a bill that would allow DC government to go out and buy existing units, put a covenant on it, and preserve it as affordable housing for as long as we can negotiate it with the landlord. So the DC government would pay the difference between what a family with more moderate income can pay and the market rate rent. benefit to the landlord is they get a lot of upfront money that they can use to make, capital improvements on their building or do with what they need. They have sort of a guaranteed income, but we go around the city and we acquire units. This also allows us to put affordable housing in parts of the city that we just don't see it develop, like Ward 2 and Ward 3. So there's so many benefits to this. It's also a very market-based approach. It, doesn't put any friction on the market. It says, look, we understand how the market works. We want to work with you, but we need affordable housing.
Now, the first question I had is you talk about acquiring units, but then you talk about landlords. So is the government becoming the owner of the property and the landlord is a management company? How are we both the owner and there's a landlord?
So I'm trying to not be too much of a lawyer. We pay for a covenant. And so there would be a covenant on however many units in a building that says for X number of years, you cannot charge more than Y amount of rent. So the DC government would not own it because I don't want us, maintaining it. That's not our strong suit. But we would have a covenant on it. So it would be guaranteed housing that we could put families and people in.
So, so unlike kind of a housing voucher where there's a sort of a subsidy going as long as a resident is in a unit, but technically the landlord could stop taking vouchers, this would be a permanent affordability lockdown.
That's right. And there is some overlap with the concept of vouchers, but yes, this is a permanent lockdown.
Gotcha. Now, a question about covenants. I live in Adams Morgan. We have our 18th Columbia Adams Morgan Farmers Market. And there's been an ongoing discussion about whether or not it was written, if a covenant was put on that land, that the farmers market needed to be maintained. That was the sort of neighborhood roar. But then when people dug down, no one could ever find a covenant. So covenants are a bit of a mystery to me. How do those work? How do they get added? Where do they get added? What office handles it? And how are they enforced?
Well, they go into the land records. I have not had to dig into the land records in DC, so I can't tell you which kind of basement you would have to go digging in. But when you need to enforce a covenant, or if you're trying to sell a property, the lawyers will go look at the land deed, the land records to see if there's a covenant, something that carries with it legal precedent. I never thought about the fact that maybe it's just enough to say we have a covenant, and maybe that at least buys you some time. So I might try that someday.
Absolutely. Now, what? So the cost would come in the difference per unit between what the tenant agrees to pay and the rent that the landlord agrees to accept under the affordability terms.
Sort of, and I didn't want to get too much into the weeds, but the tenant would pay no more than 30% of their income, and so the covenant would cover the difference between 30% of income for someone making 30% of the area median income, or 50% of someone making the area median income, and the market rent. So the covenant would cover that delta for the number of years that the covenant is in existence. So if it's a 15-year covenant, we're going to pay that entire amount up front.
Oh, okay. The entire amount's paid up front.
That's right. That's the incentive, right? Otherwise, the landlords are like, well, why do I need your covenant?
Right.
Yeah. So we're basically offering them kind of upfront cash, guaranteed occupancy. But if we don't give the cash up front, then there's really kind of no incentive for the landlord to participate. They just stay in the regular open market.
And is this something that you're hoping to try out on a pilot basis, or is this something that you hope will become one of the major tools to ensure housing affordability in DC?
I think it has the potential to become one of our major tools, but of course, I think it's wiser to start it as a pilot on a pilot basis. So I'm hoping that we can carve out a bit of money in the upcoming budget to try actually a couple pilots on housing, because we have all the tools that anybody in the country has for affordable housing, but we're losing the fight, right? Like we're nowhere near the amount of affordable housing that we need for frankly anybody in this city making less than probably $125,000. So we got to create more tools. I also do believe the tools are better if they are kind of based in the reality of the market. If you're trying to fight the market, then you have the potential to kind of create problems as you solve problems. I'm trying to solve problems as I solve problems. So we have to start trying some new tools.
And how do you think this will compare against other affordability tools? The housing preservation tax credit, or like we talked about vouchers, or the new DOPA act where the district purchases the property outright. You talked about the pros, that it's more market oriented, predictable. But how do you think cost wise it compares?
Cost wise, it actually works out very well because again, when we exercise DOPA, you still have to pay to acquire the property. It will take some time to figure out who's going to operate and manage it. So it's the type of thing that really is going to take some time. But I don't want to put DOPA down. I think it's an important tool, just like our housing vouchers and our other tools. So this just adds a new tool to our toolbox, but I think gives us a reasonable expectation of quicker execution, because we don't just put out an RFP under my bill and say, hey, if you know about this and you're interested, come to us or don't come. We actually create a small commission of real estate experts who go out into the market to affirmatively acquire units. Like we want to be aggressive in acquiring affordable units. So it's a new tool that I think again will also offer the opportunity for us to acquire some affordable housing in parts of the city that just don't see a lot of it.
And I realize this is a bill that's just been introduced. There still need to be hearings. That it's a brand new idea. So, I get that there's still, the substance of it is still coming together. But how will the commission decide which units to pursue? I know geographic diversity you mentioned, but how will they pick and choose?
Well, we have to leave some of this too, and that's why I think it's important to have real estate experts at the helm. It will be a combination of two major factors. One is cost, but the other is geography. And so one of the things that the bill does is it requires an annual report to understand how many units in each ward we are acquiring. Because if the only measure we use is cost, then we will continue to see sort of segregation of housing. It just will cost less in some wards and some neighborhoods of the city. And I don't want to see all of our affordable housing continue to go into the same neighborhoods. I want to see some diversity. So it will require, we have to go in with the expectation that it's going to cost us more to acquire a unit in Ward 3 than it will in, say, Ward 8. But it's important that we do that because we don't want to continue to feed a city that is as segregated and as stratified as DC is now.
Now, you'd mentioned hoping to get some housing pilots possibly in the budget. But what is the sort of the legislative timetable you're hoping to get this bill into law?
Well, don't tell the chairman, but we can start this as a pilot. I believe without passing the law. We have a lot of tools that we use, in the budget. There are programs the mayor's asking us to fund. They're not, legislated. They're one of the things is in the mayor's budget is this thing called high dosage tutoring. We didn't pass a law that authorized this particular tool. And so I actually don't think the law has to be in effect in order for us to try the tool. But it allowed us to introduce the idea And my hope is that we can at least get some funding for a pilot program going in this budget.
Right, because it's simply an agreement, I mean, a binding agreement, but an agreement between the government and the landlord. There's no reason the government can't enter into an agreement with the landlord.
That's right.
Having a legislative framework and the commission together, I think reinforces it. It makes it more robust. But I hear what you're saying and agree that it seems like you could put that into place in a few buildings simply through just signing a contract.
Yeah.
Another affordable housing idea I know you had in the past, and I'm not sure how active it is, but given you had introduced this prior to COVID, but now after COVID, it seems to make even more sense, is the conversion of office property to residential.
Yep.
And with the possibility that we're all going to be working from home or, possibly hybrid, people are not going to need the office space. And we have all these office buildings downtown, pure office. And it's unclear what the demand for that's going to be moving forward.
Yeah.
So what is the status of your conversion effort? What do you think the prognosis for that is?
I think we're back up at bat with that. It's an idea, as you said, to convert underutilized office buildings into residential, particularly focus on workforce housing. I think folks didn't give the idea enough credit 4 years ago or so when I introduced it. But I certainly have recognized, looking at the incredible vacancy rates that have come about because of COVID. I think so many people are realizing that they can work and prefer to work, for many of them remotely, at least sometimes. It's going to change the footprint that people need. There's going to be a lot more virtual operations. So we already had a market that was pretty soft, a commercial market that was pretty soft in the city before COVID. It's really in tough shape now. So this is an idea that really kind of meets the present need. We need a whole lot more housing, and it seems like we need a whole lot less office space. So it is time. Again, people gave the idea short shrift 4 years ago, but it is something that I'm pushing again, because it is important that we kind of deal with the reality of where we are post COVID. I just don't think we're going back to the type of work environments we had before. It'll look similar, but we're not going to see every employee in the office 9 to 5, and so I think that we have a way to respond to that.
Yeah, and I mean, DC, thank God, is doing so much better as a 24-hour city than it was. Folks who were here 15, 20 years ago remember downtown that all there were Oban Pan and Subways, and they'd all close at 3 because they didn't do any dinner business, and downtown was just deserted. And thank God we're not there anymore. But just imagine what the Farragut area would be like if there were a bunch of apartments mixed in there. That would be a whole different neighborhood with extraordinary proximity to downtown. But right now it's all 100% office.
That's right. And if you look at the plan that Mayor Williams created, I don't remember if it was the term he used or not, but he wanted to create some of our downtown neighborhoods as sort of 24/7 locations. And so we have seen some of this develop in like Gallery Place, where there was no residential there when I was growing up. In fact, there was a secret parking lot that I could always count on when I went to the clubs downtown that sat in the footprint that is now Capital One Arena, but it was deserted in the evenings. And now you have thousands of people living down there. Now we have to push that a little further south, more toward the downtown core, and I guess west as well. Had to get my bearings. Yeah.
My only logistical question about converting office to residential is plumbing. I mean, obviously there's a ton of demolition, but I just, in an office building, you tend to have a couple restrooms on each floor, whereas for residential, all of a sudden there has to be plumbing everywhere. But
there are things, but I mean, one of the things that's important to recognize, the office to residential conversions happen already. We have several examples of them in DC, and not every building works. The space, the height requirements for each floor are different for apartments than they are for offices. So some offices are built with, kind of shorter levels that, you just can't convert it. But many of our buildings can be converted, and we've done it many times. We just haven't done it in a partnership with DC government so that there's a focus on affordability. And that's what's different here is I want us to incentivize the market to act on this. And I want DC to pay some of this, really a public-private partnership, so that we are incentivizing the creation of a significant amount of affordable housing, workforce housing, when we do these conversions.
Right. I mean, I can think of one example that is already in place, right where the Pride Parade starts out in DuPont Circle, right behind that little gas station. Used to be Congressional Quarterly or something like that.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that I know is because there's always folks out on the balconies that
Yeah.
there didn't used to be at the beginning of Pride. There are people living in that building now
That's
that
right.
are getting to enjoy Pride. So
Some nice ones in Southwest.
Say that again.
There's some really nice ones in Southwest as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know nationally and internationally, this is something that people have been doing for a while. And post-COVID, like we both said, it makes a ton of sense. So I'll be glad to see that back on the agenda. Now let's pivot to the budget. I know that because there's this extra federal COVID money flowing, it seems like this is the most consensual budget release I've ever seen, where folks seem happy. The mayor and the council are getting along, and I haven't heard any major gripes. That's no fun. So do you have any major complaints or gripes to shake it up a little bit, or are you pretty happy with this proposal?
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance, right? I don't want to, kind of throw grenades for the sake of, throwing grenades. We all expected the city to be in a much more difficult position. The federal government chipped in $2.5 billion. I don't know when we will ever see that type of an infusion of federal cash in the future. And so we were able to fund a lot of things that we didn't think we'd be able to fund. And I want to give the mayor and her team credit. If I had a couple criticisms, what I would say is I believe with an unprecedented amount of cash flowing into the district, I think it's important that the budget be transformative, right? It has to make some things better than they were before, not just push everything that was along. And so I don't think the budget is transformative. Transformative is universal broadband, universal early childhood education, finding a way to strengthen our workforce program so that we really are starting to pull in all these folks in DC who have been watching the city build around them for so long. That's not what we do. I would also say that there, and I think some of this does come from not having a lot of time to sort through the federal funds. There are a number of ideas in the budget that just aren't fully thought out yet that make me a little uncomfortable. So one of the budget items I mentioned earlier, because it caught my attention, is this what they call high dosage tutoring. And I asked, the mayor and the education folks, what's the difference between high dosage tutoring and tutoring? It just sounds better, right? And I asked the superintendent of education, is this going to happen during the school day, after the school day, before the school day? They don't know yet. How many groups are going to do it? Well, they don't know yet. How are you going to evaluate which ones are working or whether the entire program? We don't know yet. So there are some kind of raw ideas in the budget. But we need to sort through it. And again, the administration didn't have a ton of time to sort through the federal dollars, and there are always a lot of needs. So if you fund one thing, that means you're not funding another. So it's all a balance. We got to get through this together. And so I will work with the mayor and her team and my council colleagues to kind of do the best we can.
One thing I've never understood was how, if the council decided to profoundly change the mayor's proposal, because the mayor puts a proposal in front of the
You're
council.
talking my language, Josh. Let's go.
Is it, I don't know, in my 7 years, it seems like there's only, I don't know if it's a time limit or a staff limit or what it is. How big could we go in terms of deviation from what the mayor puts in front of us?
There are two problems. This bothers me because, you know, I spent a decent amount of my career before the council on Capitol Hill. The president's budget proposal ain't nothing but a proposal. You know, Congress does whatever it wants to do because it has the power of the purse. So I came to the council like, yeah, we have the power of the purse. Nope. There are two issues. One is cultural. The council just doesn't take on that role, and I don't think that's the right move for the council. I like that we are more collegial than the federal government, but there are times where it's appropriate to challenge the other bodies of government, and this isn't a place where the council does it. The other place I ran into trouble once I started chairing a committee, I said, okay, well, I am going to, you know, challenge some things. Nope, the CFO stopped me and said, I'm not going to let you change anything major about the budget, because the CFO's philosophy was, if the mayor said she needs that money, then she needs that money. And, you know, I'm not going to let you cut any spending that the mayor said she needs, because then the city wouldn't be able to meet its obligations. That is ridiculous and not in accordance with DC law or the role of the CFO. So I've raised that with my colleagues. It's sort of a boring, it's a frustrating issue, but it's a boring one. So it hasn't, unfortunately, I think, gotten the traction that it needs. But I'm with you. That's the type of question that we need to ask. And I do that rabble rousing every once in a while. Not to rabble rouse, but to really kind of, you know, it's a very substantive issue, but not one that I've seen the appetite of the council to dig into.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see, I don't even know how you'd study this, but to see the percent deviation from what the mayor proposed and what the council put out.
Minuscule.
What the difference was, and if it varies substantially year to year, or if we're talking a kind of, you know, couple percent bump.
Yeah.
What, to your second point about the CFO, how do you think having an interim CFO in place this year is going to impact that consideration? Is that going to be more, do you think he'll be more tentative, or do you think there'll be a little more wiggle room potentially?
I don't think there will be more wiggle room because in our interim CFO, very, very talented guy who's been with the office for years. But, you know, interims, regardless of the kind of, you know, what position they're in, tend not to make a whole lot of waves. They try to keep the boat moving. But the CFO for the city is historically, and for good reason, very conservative. So, like a conservative interim, you know, I don't expect to open up great doors. But you never know. He may read the law differently. He may read the law as I read the law, and offer that opportunities. But I haven't broached it with him yet, and I will. So we shall see.
What are your top couple asks that you either put into the mayor before she released her budget, and or that you will go to the chairman with in terms of changes to what's proposed?
So there's several things I'd written to the mayor asking her to fund, and she did, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And I also give a lot of kudos to the people and the advocates who were advocating for these things. An LGBTQ community center, we really need one. I put some funding in the budget for it last year. The mayor put some in for it this year, so that is great. Funding the Restore the Vote Act, which I passed, that allows incarcerated residents to vote. That is so important. Bill I just passed, assessing the impact of on children and families of having incarcerated parents. Several other things that I had asked for: school-based mental health and some additional money for housing. What I still would like to see, and I'm just really dead set on the importance of this, is us funding birth to 3, really putting us on the road to universal early childhood education. That's so important for us as a city, and I think that has to continue to be really a key plank in our vision for the city going forward.
And but that is a pretty large price tag.
It is $60 million, but we are talking a $17.5 billion budget. You know, so not to say that it is easy, but is it doable if we prioritize it? It absolutely is.
And what is the risk of when the federal money goes away in a couple of years? Are we setting ourselves up for sustainable program expansion, or are we going to be hitting a wall in a couple of years?
Well, we couldn't obviously use the federal money for things that we're going to have to fund in perpetuity unless we create a funding mechanism for that going forward. So spending on federal money has to be strategic, but the majority of our budget isn't federal, stimulus dollars. The majority of our budget is locally raised dollars and the same kind of federal appropriations that every jurisdiction gets.
Well, we're just about out of time, unfortunately. One more closeout question. I wanted to ask what your take was on cicadas. Do you think they're a creepy but marvelous element of nature, or do you think they're the worst damn thing that ever happened and you can't wait for August to roll around?
Look, they only come out once every 17 years, and they have a lifespan this quick. So I say, look, have a good time. Only problem is I can't take phone calls outside my house right now because they are so loud. It sounds like a house alarm outside my house. But they're cool. We won't have to worry about them for another 17 years. So I say, look, let the cicadas live their little bit of life.
And what do the girls think?
My youngest Monroe absolutely loves them. She's a big bug. She likes to, touch them and hold them. My oldest, when she realized, she loved them too and would hold them. But once her friends got afraid of them, now she's afraid of them. But,
peer pressure is the worst.
That's right. I didn't know it kicked in so early. So I'm learning that lesson now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm on the same page with you. It's like if you invented a fictional bug that only came out every 17 years, no one would read your book. No one would buy it because it's so incredible. And the fact that it actually is a thing is breathtaking.
It is.
Well, I'm glad we bookended our intelligent conversation of affordable housing and budget with public restroom and cicada stories.
That's right.
I used to say in the intro to the show, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So hopefully we balance the two pretty carefully. But thank you again so much, Councilmember, for your time. Very grateful for that. I know this is the busiest time of year, so thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me.
For being with us. No problem. And viewers, listeners, please remember to subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search under Hearing the Council. We are on also DC Radio 96.3 on your FM HD4 dial or at dcradio.gov. Once again, thank you. I'm Josh Gibson, and this is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. Take care, Councilmember. Have a good week. Thank you. Bye-bye.